Welcome to Crime Story. Today, I bring you a chilling and haunting tale, a peaceful night in Las Vegas, where thousands gathered to enjoy the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. But little did they know, just hours later, hundreds of lives would be taken by a mysterious gunman, attacking from above. This story is not only about a brutal act of violence, but also a terrifying mystery surrounding the motive of the perpetrator, someone no one could have predicted would turn into a monster in the eyes of the public. If you find this story fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to motivate us to create even more captivating content for you. Let's dive into the story. On October 1, 2017, a night that was supposed to be filled with music, celebration, and unforgettable memories, turned into an event that would haunt the lives of thousands forever. The Route 91 Harvest Music Festival, a celebration of country music in the heart of Las Vegas, was winding down with its final headliner, country music star Jason Aldean. The venue, filled with over 22,000 eager fans, had no idea that the night would end in tragedy. What was meant to be the last song of the festival would instead be the last moments for many people, as terror reigned from above. From the comfort of a high-rise suite at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, a man who appeared as ordinary as any other, opened fire on the unsuspecting crowd. The shots rang out in the night, sending festival-goers into a frenzy of fear and confusion. In those moments, there was no clear understanding of what was happening. Some thought the noise was fireworks, others simply froze in disbelief. But when the reality of the situation set in, chaos unfolded at an unimaginable scale. The night began like any other concert, with people dancing and enjoying the music. It was a night of joy, a night to remember. But within minutes, that celebration turned into a nightmare. As the first shots echoed across the festival grounds, lives were shattered, and the world would never look at Las Vegas the same way again. What transpired that evening remains one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history. But what drove Stephen Paddock to commit such an unimaginable act? What was his motivation? Was there a trigger, a moment, a reason that led to this catastrophic decision? The answers to these questions remain elusive, as authorities scrambled to piece together the details of that fateful night. Was it an impulsive act, or had he been planning this attack for months? As the investigation into his actions unraveled, no clear motive emerged. There were no signs, no manifestos, and no political or social cause behind his actions. Just a man, seemingly out of nowhere, who turned his back on the world and decided to bring chaos to one of the busiest places on earth. As the world watched in horror, the mystery surrounding the shooting deepened. Stephen Paddock, a man with no apparent connections to extremist groups or any notable hatred, did something that none could fathom. The event would spark a nationwide conversation about gun laws, safety, and the need for better mental health screening, but it would also leave one chilling question unanswered: why? What caused this lone wolf to strike, and why did he choose that moment, that place, and those innocent people? As we dive deeper into the details of the case, the chilling facts continue to unfold, revealing a man who, despite his outward appearance, carried a darkness within. A darkness that would alter the course of history and leave behind a trail of unanswered questions. The night was meant to be a celebration. But for the families of the victims, and the survivors who will never forget, it became a symbol of senseless loss and a painful reminder of the fragility of life. Stephen Paddock, a name now forever linked with tragedy, was, in the years leading up to October 1, 2017, a man who seemed remarkably ordinary. At 64 years old, he had retired from his career as an accountant, choosing a quieter life in the small town of Mesquite, Nevada, just over 80 miles from the bright lights of Las Vegas. From the outside, he appeared to be living a peaceful, uneventful life. In a community filled with retirees, Paddock was just another face, quietly living out his days, largely unnoticed by those around him. He wasn't a threat in anyone's eyes. To the people who saw him regularly, Paddock was a familiar figure at the casinos. A high-stakes gambler, he often spent his nights playing video poker, a solitary activity that kept him in the shadows of the bustling casino floors. He wasn't the life of the party, nor was he someone who drew attention to himself. Instead, he was a man who lived alone, kept to himself, and spent much of his time on his own. He had a long-term girlfriend, but even in that relationship, there were signs of a growing distance. Though they lived together, those close to him began noticing changes in his behavior. It was subtle at first, just small signs of withdrawal, a shift in demeanor. But over time, it became undeniable. Paddock's relationship with his girlfriend was described as being distant and increasingly strained in the year leading up to the shooting. They had spent years together, but the man she had known seemed to be slipping away. He became more reclusive, less engaged, and far more difficult to reach emotionally. The man who once shared moments with her had started to fade into someone else, someone who seemed trapped in his own mind, a mind that no one could understand or reach. Despite these changes, there was nothing about Paddock's past that immediately screamed danger. There were no violent outbursts, no history of aggression. He was not known to be a troublemaker. However, if you dug a little deeper, you would find that his family history painted a far darker picture. His father, Benjamin Paddock, had once been a notorious criminal, a bank robber who had spent years on the FBI's most wanted list. While Stephen had lived a relatively quiet life, the shadow of his father's criminal past was something that would haunt him, whether he realized it or not. In a world that thrives on secrets and hidden pasts, Paddock seemed to have none of the outward signs that would set off alarm bells. He wasn't on any government watch lists. He wasn't a member of any extremist groups. And yet, something in him was changing. The people around him may not have seen it coming, but there were small signs too small to be noticed by most that something was stirring inside him. Those who knew him best saw him slowly retreat into isolation. Perhaps, in his mind, he was already planning something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Paddock's descent into this isolation was quiet. It wasn't a dramatic fall from grace, but a subtle shift, a man withdrawing from the world, from those around him, from the very things that once connected him to others. In the year before the shooting, his behavior became more erratic, more unpredictable. His gambling habits escalated, but so did his sense of detachment. Those closest to him began to feel it. But no one could have guessed that, in just a few months, the quiet, solitary man from Mesquite would become the perpetrator of one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. The calm before the storm was just that, an illusion of peace, a quiet before an unthinkable tragedy that no one could have predicted. No one knew the storm that was brewing inside of Stephen Paddock. But in hindsight, perhaps there were more clues than anyone had realized. But there was something darker, something insidious, slowly brewing beneath the surface. 4 weeks before the horrific events of October 1st, Stephen Paddock meticulously plotted his attack with chilling precision. He didn't act on a whim, nor did he lash out in a moment of madness. No, Paddock had planned every detail, and those details would unfold on that fateful night. But who would have suspected a man like him? A man who, up until that point, had blended seamlessly into the fabric of the city, unnoticed by the very people who might have been able to stop him. It all began when Paddock reserved a suite at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, the towering landmark on the Las Vegas Strip. It wasn't just any suite, it was a room that would give him the perfect vantage point, directly overlooking the Route 91 Harvest Festival grounds. From that height, with the crowds below, he could survey the entire scene, waiting, watching, calculating. The festival, a massive country music event drawing tens of thousands of attendees, would be the ideal target. The crowds, the noise, the excitement, it would all mask the horror he was about to unleash. In the days leading up to the shooting, Paddock carried large, heavy bags into his suite, each one filled with firearms, ammunition, and high-capacity magazines. He wasn't discreet, he simply carried them into the hotel, without a care in the world. Over several days, he continued to bring in more weapons, more equipment. Each time, he was met with nothing more than routine interactions with hotel staff. To them, he was just another guest, another high-stakes gambler checking into a luxury suite. There was no reason to believe that the man who checked in was anything other than an ordinary guest with an ordinary stay. And yet, the sheer magnitude of what Paddock was preparing for the deadly arsenal, the careful planning, the calculated movements was something that no one noticed. It was all there, right in front of their eyes, but it went completely unnoticed. Each day, the bags piled up, filled with tools of destruction, as Paddock quietly and methodically prepared for the worst mass shooting the United States would ever witness. How could someone so calculated, so precise in his planning, go unnoticed by so many? How could something so devastating be so easily hidden in plain sight? To anyone who might have glimpsed him, Paddock was just another gambler with no outward signs of trouble. But the truth was far darker. While the staff at the Mandalay Bay went about their day, unaware of the danger lurking in one of their suites, Paddock had transformed from a quiet retiree into a ticking time bomb. His actions weren't those of a man who was unhinged in the moment. They were the actions of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, a man who was carefully executing a plan that would send shockwaves across the country. What was going through his mind in those days leading up to the shooting? Did he feel a sense of power, knowing he could strike from above, unseen? Was he preparing for something, or simply savoring the calm before the storm? These are questions that remain unanswered, as we are left to wonder how such a well-prepared, methodical attack could go undetected, until it was too late. The night of October 1, 2017, was meant to be a celebration. The Route 91 Harvest Music Festival had drawn over 22,000 attendees, all gathered to enjoy the final night of the festival, eagerly awaiting the closing performance by country music star Jason Aldean. For the concertgoers, it was supposed to be the pinnacle of the three-day event: music, excitement, and memories made with friends. But as the crowd swayed and cheered to the rhythm of the music, something far more sinister was unfolding above them. High in the Mandalay Bay Hotel, where Stephen Paddock had quietly prepared his deadly plan, everything was set in motion. At approximately 10:05 p.m., the first shots rang out, shattering the peace of the night. Paddock, from his suite on the 32nd floor, began firing indiscriminately, sending a barrage of bullets into the unsuspecting crowd below. In the early moments of the attack, many in the crowd mistook the noise for fireworks. The festival's vibrant energy continued for a few fleeting seconds, as people danced, unaware that their lives were about to be altered forever. But the reality soon struck like a hammer blow. The sound of rapid gunfire wasn't a celebration, it was a deadly assault, and the festival grounds were ground zero. Within moments, the atmosphere shifted from joy to chaos. Panic spread like wildfire as people began to realize what was happening. The gunfire, relentless and deafening, rained down on the crowd. People scattered, running in every direction, desperately seeking shelter. The open spaces where they had once danced now felt like traps, and the loud music from the stage was drowned out by the terror unfolding around them. Amid the chaos, security guard Jesus Campos was one of the first to respond. Campos had been alerted to a barricaded door on the 32nd floor and, following protocol, went to investigate. As he approached the door, he encountered something unexpected: a makeshift barricade, which was enough to catch his attention. But before he could fully assess the situation, he was struck by gunfire, shot in the right thigh by one of the bullets Paddock had fired through the door of his suite. Despite being wounded, Campos didn't retreat. Instead, he sought cover and immediately contacted the hotel dispatch to report the shooting. His calm and decisive actions in those first moments of chaos became crucial. Though wounded, Campos's communication with law enforcement helped pinpoint the location of the shooter and allowed the authorities to zero in on Paddock's suite. Meanwhile, The horror continued to unfold on the festival grounds. The crowd, now in full flight, was caught in a nightmare of confusion. Some sought refuge behind light posts, others in the concrete barriers, but for many, there was no safe place. The gunfire kept coming, and for those caught in its path, there was nowhere to hide. Paddock's position on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel gave him an extraordinary advantage. From his vantage point, he could fire down on the crowds below with little chance of being stopped. It was a terrifying realization for those below, trapped by the same vantage point Paddock had planned to use for his deadly purpose. As the police scrambled to respond, Campos's bravery in the face of danger provided vital information that would ultimately lead them to Paddock. But even then, the full scale of the attack hadn't fully sunk in. The confusion, the multiple reports of gunshots coming from different directions, and the sheer volume of the assault made it difficult for law enforcement to assess the situation. In those critical moments, while the crowd ran for their lives, the police worked desperately to locate the shooter. But the clock was ticking. Every second felt like an eternity as the gunfire continued to echo over the Strip, a constant reminder of the horror that had begun just moments before. The terror that night would ultimately end when Paddock was found dead in his suite from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but the scars from that evening would be carried by the victims, the survivors, and the city of Las Vegas forever. What began as an ordinary night at a music festival turned into one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history, a tragedy that would leave more questions than answers, and a deep sense of unease that still lingers today. When the shooting ended, when the chaos and panic began to settle, the questions started. What could possibly drive a man like Stephen Paddock to commit such a horrific act? In the wake of the massacre, the investigation into his actions began. The authorities found a chilling scene inside his suite on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. There, they discovered over 24 firearms, each legally purchased, along with thousands of rounds of ammunition, and other materials, including bump stocks devices that allowed the rifles to fire at a rapid pace, simulating automatic fire. The scale of what Paddock had prepared was overwhelming. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a well-planned assault. But despite all the evidence of premeditation, there was no clear explanation for why he did it. There was no manifesto, no note left behind, nothing that would shed light on his reasoning. The rifles, the ammunition, the planning, it was all in place, but the motive remained a mystery. What authorities did find was a man who had seemingly slipped through the cracks. Paddock had no known ties to extremist groups, no criminal history that would suggest a violent outburst. He wasn't on any watch list, nor was there any indication that he held any ideological or political motivations. He wasn't driven by hate towards any particular group, and there were no clear signs that he was seeking revenge for a past wrong. He was, to most people, just another person in the crowd, quiet, isolated, but outwardly harmless. Yet, he had orchestrated a massacre that left 60 people dead and hundreds more wounded. The question that loomed over the investigation was this: why? Why would someone, who had seemingly no reason to hate, decide to take the lives of so many innocent people? Was it a moment of rage? A deep-seated anger that had been building over time, one that finally exploded? Or was there something more calculated behind his actions? Investigators scoured every detail of Paddock's life, looking for a clue, a pattern, a hint that might explain his motives. They delved into his past, examining his financial troubles, his gambling habits, and his relationships. Yet, nothing stood out as a clear trigger for the attack. Some speculated that he may have been planning to escape after the shooting, given the large quantity of weapons and materials found in his room. Perhaps he had hoped to flee the scene, but something stopped him. Others believed that he may have been overwhelmed by a moment of unexplainable rage, the kind of sudden burst of violence that no one can predict or explain. But even those theories didn't fully satisfy the unanswered questions. As the investigation dragged on, the mystery only deepened. The more authorities uncovered, the less clear it became why Paddock had done what he did. Was there an accomplice? Some sort of outside influence that pushed him to commit this act? Or was he simply a man who, after a lifetime of hidden struggles, decided to take matters into his own hands, in the most violent way imaginable? Months passed, and still, the motive remained elusive. Was it as simple as a man slipping into madness? Or was there something more? This investigation would remain open-ended, with more questions than answers. The motive behind the attack remained one of the darkest mysteries of the entire case, leaving everyone who studied it to wonder, could anyone have seen it coming? And why did it happen at all? The mystery, for now, remains unsolved. The investigation into the events of that night continues to haunt those who were impacted, those who lost loved ones, and those who were left with the question that continues to linger: why? Part 5, The Aftermath and the Call for Change. The devastating attack left 60 people dead and over 800 injured, making it the deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history. In the immediate aftermath, the world watched as law enforcement, first responders, and ordinary citizens mobilized in a show of strength and resilience. The community of Las Vegas, shaken by the tragedy, quickly transformed into a symbol of resilience. People came together to support the victims, offering everything from blood donations to financial aid, as they rallied behind those affected by the senseless violence. Despite the overwhelming response and the shared grief, the aftermath was not just about recovery, it was also about change. As the country mourned, the event sparked a nationwide debate about gun control, firearm accessibility, and the need for better regulations. At the center of the discussion was the use of bump stocks, devices that allowed semi-automatic rifles to fire at rapid speeds, effectively mimicking the rate of an automatic weapon. These devices, which had been used by Paddock during the shooting, became a focal point for public outrage. Many argued that such devices had no place in civilian hands, and that their accessibility made it easier for tragedies like the one in Las Vegas to occur. In the months that followed, the U.S. Justice Department took action, issuing a ban on bump stocks in December 2018. But the legal battle surrounding the ban did not end there. The fight continued for years, as opponents of the ban sought to overturn it, arguing that it infringed on their rights. The debate over gun control had been reignited, and the tragic events of October 1, 2017, only intensified the calls for stricter regulations. Despite the ban on bump stocks, questions about the broader issue of gun control and public safety remained unresolved, with passionate arguments on both sides of the issue. Even now, years after the tragedy, the motive behind Stephen Paddock's actions remains a haunting mystery. Was he a man driven by personal demons, pushed to the edge by a life of isolation and struggle? Or was there something deeper at play, some hidden, unspoken reason for the horror he unleashed? The truth may never be fully known. As time goes on, the questions surrounding Paddock's actions only grow, and the search for answers continues. What is clear, however, is the profound impact that night had on the lives of those who were there. The lives lost, the survivors forever changed by the trauma they endured, and the ongoing conversations about gun control and public safety. The tragedy sparked a national conversation about how to prevent such acts of violence in the future, but it also left an indelible mark on the hearts of those affected. In the years that have passed, memorials have been erected, and communities have come together to honor the victims and ensure that they are never forgotten. Their memories are kept alive by the survivors, by the families of those who perished, and by a nation still grappling with the ramifications of that fateful night. As we continue to search for answers, we are reminded of the importance of peace, justice, and understanding. The victims of October 1, 2017, will never be forgotten. Their story, and the story of that tragic night, will live on as a reminder that, while we may never have all the answers, the quest for a safer, more peaceful world must never stop. Thank you for watching this chilling story with us. If you found this video intriguing, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more gripping stories like this one to you. Stay tuned for more, and remember, keep seeking the truth, no matter how dark it may be. See you in the next video.